What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Corey Used Bloody History. Jack Ruby, FBI Files, Part 6. Here we go. December 1st, 63. All these headings are Jack Ruby, Jack Rubenstein, Lee Harvey Oswald, blah, 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 always the same. Mary J. Walker, student, Florida, Southern College, Lakeland, Florida, contacted at her request by S.A. Glide B. Gentry Jr. today and advised as follows. A friend whom Walker refused to name recently told Walker she had telephonically talked to Sally Kruckerberg, 32 Janet Street, Buffalo, New York, who told the friend Frank Cortelli, boyfriend of Kruckerberg, said he had talked to Jack Ruby in Miami, Florida, some time ago. Kruckerberg said Cortelli heard Jack Ruby make the statement something should be done about Attorney General Robert Kennedy, putting so much pressure on the rackets, unquote. He was closing a lot of the rackets businesses, unquote. Walker considers info unreliable, as Walker has known to Cortelli to attempt to impress Kruckerberg in the past by pointing out people he claimed he knew as, quote, gangsters in the Buffalo area. Walker believes Cortelli in Miami from 1962 to spring of 63. Cortelli last known to be employed Cheng's Chinese Restaurant, Main and High Streets in Buffalo. Kruckerberg, according to Walker, claims she is attempting to break off relationship with Cortelli, who has proposed marriage to Kruckerberg. Kruckerberg now employed General Hospital Buffalo, formerly U.S. Air Force, with Walker, and Walker requests Kruckerberg not be contacted if possible. Buffalo immediately locate and thoroughly interview Frank Cortelli re his alleged conversation with Jack Ruby. Miami Sutel indices check to determine if Frank Cortelli known to your office. Tampa indices negative re Mary J. Walker, Frank Cortelli, and Sally Kruckerberg. December 1st, 1963, to Director SAC Dallas from SAC LA. Reference Jack Ruby et al. Presently an inmate, we have a long sentence that's redacted. And then it says, presently an inmate at the Federal Correctional Institute at Terminal Island, California. And then 2 lines of redactions. Requested on November 29 last that Secret Service contact him as he had info re his association with Jack Ruby in the past and might be able to shed some light on the present situation. November 30 instant SAC Guy H. Spaman, S-P-A-M-A-N, of the U.S. Secret Service Los Angeles, and S.A. William John Nolan, FBI Los Angeles, contacted redacted at the above-named institution. So the redaction is really short. Really short. Like, it's got to be like a 3 or 4 letter name. Redacted, who was best characterized as a confidence man, advised that in about the latter part of 1952 or early 1953, he was in Dallas area with his uncle, and a long redaction. Presently a dealer for the Sands, Las Vegas, who introduced him to Ruby. At that time was running a club name not recalled. Redacted is best characterized as a confidence man. That's a guy who pulls scams. Then in about the latter part of 1952 or early 53, he was in Dallas area with his uncle, and there's a long redaction. Presently a dealer for the Sands, Las Vegas. I don't know why, but that's ringing some bells for me. All right, continuing on. Ruby, who at the time was running a club name not recalled, but looked like a wooden shed where he charged admission and specialized in the sale of fried chicken. This is the point that Redacted made the most of, that for the period of some 3 years that he was associated with Ruby in various questionable activities, Ruby was extremely fond of fried chicken, and Redacted had noticed in news reports that Oswald had apparently left some evidence of eating chicken behind when he fled the scene of the assassination. That's a hilarious connection someone's trying to make. Redacted advised he became friendly with Ruby at that time, 1952, and he, Redacted, remained in the Dallas area, where he was then utilizing the name of Redacted, which he utilized in gaining access to an individual with money, one Dick Andrade, who was a heavy bettor on gambling events. Through this contact, Redacted was able to gain access as a guest of Andrade to the Petroleum Club in the Baker Hotel at Dallas, and on one occasion he had Ruby there as his own guest and told Ruby that utilizing the name Redacted, he was able to get heavy bets down through Andrade's contacts at Montreal, as Andrade would vouch for him. Redacted also admitted signing checks in the name of Redacted, which were no good, and this also was known to Ruby. Ruby advised him that Redacted is a Jew. And he'd have no chance if caught in Dallas, and that he needed Ruby to go into the deal with him, as he, Ruby, had plenty of, quote, juice, unquote, going with the Dallas PD. Redacted advised that he cut Ruby in on this deal on a 60-40 split, with Ruby putting up the money that Redacted needed for, quote, flash, unquote, in his dealing with Andrade. Redacted advised that as a result of this type of operation, they won about $5,000, which he and Ruby decided they would go to Montreal, Canada to collect. They flew to Chicago, and Ruby stayed there, and Redacted went to Montreal, where he collected the $5,000 and gambled it up to $20,000. His point in this story was that Ruby in Chicago was always contacted by him at that time at a store that sold off-brand merchandise located on North State Street, west side of Street, 1/2 block south of Grand, which store behind the scenes had all kinds of weapons available to those who desired them. Redacted could not recall the name of the individual running the store, but stated that this individual had a brother running a similar store, also in Chicago, who's an ex-con. Redacted raised the point that perhaps Ruby secured the weapon he used from this place. Redacted advised that an individual named Gordon paid him off at Montreal and returned to Chicago and split the proceeds with Ruby. He advised that during this period he traveled to Oklahoma City with Ruby, then to Shreveport, Louisiana. Also, they gambled in various places. He advised that on one occasion he and Ruby teamed up together with some gamblers at Dallas and managed to take them for about $70,000 or $80,000 using Redacted as a mark for the gamblers under the identity of Redacted. So this short redaction here of this Jewish guy, it's only got to be 3 or 4 letters, like 4 letters tops. Like, how many Jewish last names are 4 letters long? Redacted related some schemes that involved abortive attempts to utilize a doctor scam on H.L. Hunt concerning a son named Hassie, who was then located at Concord, Massachusetts. He also advised that he and Ruby on one New Year's Day prior to 1956 had Redacted use the name of Redacted and go to Fort Worth and bet H.L. Hunt some $5,000 on 5 different bowl games involving Texas and Tennessee in the Cotton Bowl and Michigan and California in the Rose Bowl, to recall a few of the games. And he and Ruby split $5,000 between them on this deal. He advised that also prior to Redacted going to Chino for forgery in April of 1955, Ruby had been in the Los Angeles area, having first gone to San Francisco, where he had some kind of dealings with one, quote, Stoney, unquote, a bookmaker, well known in the San Francisco area, with either Kecky or Sally Schumann, also in the San Francisco area, which individuals Redacted alleged were visiting the ships that docked and were picking up smuggled merchandise from the seamen. Redacted also advised that during the period he was acquainted with Ruby, Ruby maintained 2 residences at Dallas, addresses not recalled. One of these was quite pretentious and the other was quite bare, and it was at this second one that Ruby maintained some kind of records. As Redacted stated, on a visit to this place, he observed manila envelopes, which Ruby picked up one night and took them to his club, which, according to Redacted at that time, charged admission and was located in a shed-like building. Ruby, according to Redacted, had a number of handguns, which he, Hall, has seen. Ooh, okay. So why do all of a sudden we have this name Hall thrown in here? Let's reread this, because this is some of the more interesting stuff that we've come across in the Jack Ruby files thus far, right? And we don't have any names here. But then all of a sudden, we're looking for a short 3 or 4 letter last name of a Jewish guy. And then all of a sudden we have this name thrown in here that's 4 letters long and not redacted. So let's read this last couple sentences. One of these was quite pretentious and the other was quite bare. And it was at this second one that Ruby maintained some kind of records. We're talking about these 2 different residences Ruby had. As Redacted stated, on a visit to this place, he observed manila envelopes, which Ruby picked up one night and took with him to his club, which, according to Redacted, at that time charged admission and was located in a shed-like building. Ruby, according to Redacted, had a number of handguns, which he, Hall, has seen. So it looks like this guy's name is Hall, and it's not redacted by accident. That's what I'm getting from this, because there's no other people in this conversation. Ruby, according to Hall, had a number of handguns which he, Hall, has seen. That's a fluid sentence. So yeah, this guy's name is Hall. It's not Lauren Hall, because he's talking about stuff that he did with Jack Ruby in the mid 1950s. And in the mid 1950s, Lauren Hall was in the army, and he was down in Cuba, and he was doing all that stuff, right? So it's a different Hall. But guys in the research chat, Jim, if you can see if you just do a quick search to see if Ruby is associated with anybody named Hall over the years. All right, so I won't have to say redacted anymore. Hall has had no contact with Ruby since Hall went to prison in April of 1955, but stated that if Ruby would talk to anyone, he would talk to Hall, and offered his services to go to Dallas and attempt to find out what motivated Ruby, as he characterized Ruby as an individual who would not do anything unless there was money involved. Hall admits motivation of his call to Secret Service was to gain favorable consideration for himself in connection with the future release on parole. No leads being set out. F302 follows, second line from bottom 6, blah, blah, blah. All right, next one, December 1st, 63. To director from SAC Dallas. Retail call, A. Conley, SOG, 8:20 p.m., November 29, item 3, sandwiches. Info, interviews, employees, radio station KLIF, furnished you by teletype, sent 7:30 p.m., November 29, with reference to teletype of telecall of Mr. Hanley, November 28, 63, setting forth 19 questions. Employees who sold sandwiches at Phil's Delicatessen, 3531 Oak Lawn, Dallas, recalled that Jack Ruby, sometime between 8 and 10 p.m. night of November 22, 63, purchased 8 corned beef sandwiches with mustard, 10 cold drinks, 8 black cherry, and 2 celery tonic. Ugh, that sounds fucking gross. 1/2 loaf of bread, 3 cups butter, and extra pickles, stating that disc jockeys at radio station KLIF Dallas were working late and that he would take these sandwiches to them. Mention was made of the assassination of President, but his comment was that it was a terrible thing. All right, I'm pausing here because I'm reflecting on this. I know about this story. I've never spent too much time on Jack Ruby. I mean, just the basics that would fit into the overall tale that I tell. But I really, really need to spend a lifetime just digging through Jack Ruby's timeline and kind of separating the Jack Ruby, Samuel Ruby duality. The need for that arises because of Samuel Ruby's overwhelming involvement in events that took place throughout the timeline from November 22nd to November 24th. And a great deal of time needs to be spent separating these two men's actions those days. Like we talked about on the first day in the Jack Ruby, we did the Jack Ruby Files Part 1. That witness down in Houston who he's convinced is Jack Ruby at the store buying a gun, right? We don't know how accurate that story is, but that to me supports the notion that he had gone to Galveston and that he had stayed at the Alamo Motel with Candy Barr and Andrew Blackman. And that would lend credence to the idea that he wasn't in Dallas. And if he wasn't in Dallas, who the fuck was in Dallas? Who everyone saw and said was Jack Ruby. Well, obviously Samuel Ruby, the one Ruby that no one ever talks about. As we're doing these Jack Ruby episodes, I will pull what little stuff there is on Samuel Ruby. And when I say what little stuff there is, off the top of my head, I can think of 2 documents. Each one is like a couple sentences, and that's it. The most I learned about Samuel Ruby was from looking him up on newspapers.com, where I believe I found an article about Samuel Ruby got into an argument with his wife in public, and he was arrested and had to go before the court, and the court sentenced him to take his wife out on a date. That was the court sentence for Samuel Ruby. And Samuel Ruby owned a whole bunch of washaterias. Washaterias are like the do-it-yourself laundromat that we have today. And so you can, if you have a newspapers.com subscription, you're curious, put in Samuel Ruby Washateria, and you'll find, you can even narrow it down to Chicago and Dallas, to those two cities. And you will find exactly what I'm talking about. Right? I swear to God, newspapers.com was for a long time, and probably still is, one of the best resources out there for historians. The problem that I ran into when COVID hit was that there were clearly people involved in doing some sort of information campaign involving newspapers.com, because when you started to look for some of the stuff on the flu from the 1970s, all of it would get buried under people's clippings. Right? You'd search for it, and then what would come up would be hundreds of pages of clippings that people made that really were irrelevant. And so they made it, once COVID hit, it became so much harder to use that as a resource. But I should probably re-up my subscription there and kick off my next batch of work based around the newspaper articles. Newspaper articles inadvertently tell the truth sometimes. More so in 1950s and 60s than today, for sure. So let's get back to this document. He purchased a bunch of corned beef sandwiches with mustard, 10 cold drinks, stated the disc jockeys needed it. So why did he tell them that he was going to the disc jockeys? Like, you notice that people's behavior in this story of Kennedy, it involves a lot of people providing a lot of information that nobody asks for or probably gives a fuck about. Right? Like when Oswald goes to meet with Miss McGee in Baton Rouge and looks at her apartment and starts going off about communism and Kennedy and all this crap that she didn't ask about. Right? Like they're leaving an impression for a reason. It almost seems like this is the distraction story. Right? This is the distraction story. And in the case of Jack Ruby, we know what happened with Samuel Ruby. Samuel Ruby was Jack Ruby for most of that weekend. So, if this was the distractionary event, and I'm only speculating here, what was going on at this time? This is the night of November 22nd. So the night of November 22nd, between 8 and 10 p.m. What could have possibly happened? What could have Jack Ruby have done on the night of November 22nd between 8 and 10 p.m.? Got out of Dallas, right? He would have gotten out of Dallas. And so, this being a distractionary event, this has to have been Samuel Ruby, because Jack was already already on his way out of town, right? Where he would go to, ultimately to Galveston, drop off Andrew Jerome Blackman. But I believe they had to have stayed, and he didn't get back to his boat till Monday, so they had to have stayed in the Alamo Motel, which nobody was checked out of until Sunday. And then Sunday, he had to have taken him. Well, there's no reason that he had to have. The boat was leaving Monday, but there's no reason he couldn't have gotten there earlier, right? That's an aspect I've never looked into. Did Andrew Jerome Blackman head back to his boat earlier, meaning on Sunday night? Possible. Clearly possible. Jack Ruby would have had to have been gone, right? He would have had to have wrapped up everything he was doing by Saturday, which means he would have had to have been to Galveston. He's seen in Saturday in Houston buying the gun. So maybe, so I'm speculating again here, that Jack left Andrew Jerome Blackman in the Alamo Motel Saturday, where he stays until Sunday, but Jack's already has to be back, and he probably went back with Candy Bar, leaving Jerome Blackman to get a ride from Houston to Galveston on Sunday evening or Monday. So that leaves open other people moving around in order to do transport, right? But we're getting way off topic. But I'm glad that this document triggered that, because now it's on my mind. Who else was on the road driving from Houston to Galveston to Dallas at the same time as all this was going on? There was somebody. The fuck was his name? The boyfriend of Little Lynn. Carlton. God, it's on the tip of my tongue. But he was bouncing around back and forth around between Houston and Dallas at the time that all this is going on throughout the assassination and over that weekend. So that leaves him to have possibly been a transporter of black men from the Hotel Saturday in Houston to Galveston. Billy Carlson? No, I can't. God damn it. It's on the tip of my tongue what this fucking guy's name is. I'm going to kick myself for not remembering. Little Lynn's boyfriend, Jim, if you're going to end up trying to look this up. But let me continue. Mention was made of the assassination of the president, but his comment was that it was a terrible thing. He mentioned that they were closed up at KLIF, but that he was sure he could get in with the sandwiches. Ruby mentioned that his club Carousel was closed for 3 nights. Beginning that night, when asked why, he stated there were other things important besides money. He made phone call and was overheard to say something to the effect that he would try to, quote, slip back, unquote, to the club later. He was wearing soft gray felt hat, which he always wears. Total bill was $9.50 plus, and he paid for it with a $20 bill. Hang on a second. It was $9.50. Let's just figure it's about 10 times. So it's about $95 for fucking how many sandwiches? Jesus Christ. This isn't expensive. Those better be some good-ass sandwiches. He gave the counterman who prepared the sandwiches a business card, which he stated would entitle him to a free admission either at the Club Vegas or the Carousel Club. You know, nobody ever pays attention to the Vegas Club. We need to dig into the Vegas Club big time. Big time. He did not order anything for himself at the delicatessen. The counterman carried the sandwiches out and put them in a 4-door white automobile. A 4-door white automobile. Of course, because what would Jack Ruby be driving? That green truck. That green truck. All right, next document. Urgent 1126. To Director SAC, Los Angeles and Dallas. Same headings as before. Alleged communist activities. Read Dallas tell this date. Re-unsub possibly Jack Rubenstein, who allegedly traveled to Muncie, Indiana in company of son-in-law of Jaffe in early 40s and possibly 1946-47. For Info Los Angeles, Portland advised George William, and the last name is some name starts with F-E, it looks like M. Something jewelry store proprietor, Medford, Oregon, in a signed statement alleges that in about 1942, he took a job with Sam Jaffe as a jewelry apprentice at store located in Muncie, Indiana. There, a group of men in neighborhood talked about Communist Party in Russia and believed their members of Communist Party were Philip Jasser, Jasser, Lawson Jaffe, Jaffee, and Morton Stand, Standt, all of Muncie. About 6 months to a year thereafter, a group of people came from Chicago for what sources believe was to hold meeting in Muncie. Meeting was believed to have had something to do with Communist Party or Russia. It was held in Union Hall, upstairs from store where source worked in Jewish meeting hall. Son-in-law of Sam Jaffe was one of people who came from Chicago and brought with him a man who introduced sources Jack Rubenstein. Phonetic source saw a photo of Jack Ruby on television and initially did not think more of it. However, later it suddenly came to him that Jack Ruby was the same person who was introduced to Source in Muncie as Jack Rubenstein. Source recalled Jack Rubenstein came to Muncie twice with son-in-law of Sam Jaffe before Source went into Navy June 1, 1944. Both times they were there attending meeting with a group that talked to source about Communist Party. A source recalled Jack Rubenstein was in show business in Chicago since he showed source few card tricks and read from a folded paper something source had written. He also brought with him very tall blonde girl who was in show business. Source was discharged from Navy June 1, 1946, and returned to employment of Sam Jaffe in Muncie. Shortly after June 1947, there was another meeting. There was another meeting held, and Jack Rubenstein again came from Chicago with son-in-law of Sam Jaffe. This meeting held in Union Hall above Jaffe's store. Next day, source visited Union Hall, saw a list of names on the table. First names source recalls were those of Lawson Jaffe, Philip Jasser, Herbert Pizzol, Morton Stant, and Jack Rubenstein. Source advised that other pictures shown to him of Jack Ruby bear very strong likeness to person who was introduced to Source's Jack Rubenstein. Other photos shown to Source, and he could not make positive identification. After about 1947, Source never saw Rubenstein again. He described the Jack Rubenstein who visited Muncie as follows: 30 to 35 years old, about 5'10" to 6 feet, 165 to 175. No scars or marks or anything unusual that he could recall, but almost always wore a hat. Source advised Sam Jaffe died in Miami in 1959 or 60 and buried in Chicago, where his widow is believed to still live. He had two daughters, Charlotte and another name unknown, who was married to above son-in-law in Muncie, where Pizzols once operated jewelry store at Jackson and Walnut Streets. Dallas requested investigation to develop data to determine if Jack Rubenstein, allegedly in company of son-in-law of Sam Jaffe, is identical with Jack Ruby involved in Oswald murder. Sidney Levinson Jewelry, Chicago, advises S.A. Herbert K. Stallings this date that Sam Jaffe had 3 children, all girls, which are as follows. Charlotte married to Seymour Chazin, CPA, Highland Park. Why does that last name sound familiar? Did we cover that name recently? Chazin, Chazin. Rosalind married to Irwin Burke, 5'8", alcove. Marianne married to Max Pritzker, owner of Cindy Sue Restaurant, Chicago. All these names are so familiar, like we've already discussed them. Levinson advised Mrs. Sonia Jaffe, wife of Sam Jaffe, presently in Florida, exact location unknown. Levinson stated Burke, married to Rosalind, was in show business in Chicago and still booking agent Los Angeles area. He described Burke as being, quote, red-haired jerk, unquote. Indices negative on above named individuals. Max Pritzker, owner Cindy Sue Restaurant, Chicago, son-in-law Sam Jaffe, advised S.A. Walter Boyle and Richard Hansen this date that son-in-law residing in Chicago during pertinent period is Irwin Burke, now of Los Angeles. He said he could furnish no info re-identity of individual in question. Los Angeles interview Irwin Burke and develop data as to possible trips to Muncie, early 40s and approximately 1946 or 7, and identify individual brought by son-in-law or of Sam Jaffe to Muncie with him for purposes of determining whether Jack Rubenstein's subject in Oswald case is identical. Suggests son-in-law be shown photos of Jack Ruby. For info, Los Angeles, Indianapolis telephonically advised this date Morton Pizzol was chairman of CP Muncie branch 1946 and interviewed in 1952, admitted membership in Muncie branch from 1940 to 47, stating he withdrew from Communist Party in 47 because he could no longer accept Communist Party ideas. Indianapolis has located Herbert Pizzol and Morton Stand and also has interviewed Morton Pizzol. None recall unidentified subject who traveled to Muncie with son-in-law of Sam Jaffe. Indianapolis, New York, Cincinnati, blah, blah, blah. So they went to a lot of trouble to determine if this Jack Rubenstein is the same Jack Rubenstein who went to these Communist Party meetings. But the thing is, when you get out of this area and you go back to New Haven, Connecticut, you got Earl Rubenstein and other female Rubenstein family members who were associated with the Communist Party. So it's weird, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I'm starting to think that there was just a lot of people with the name Rubenstein. There was a lot of Jews with the name Rubenstein. None of them Ruby at the time. All Rubenstein. I still think it's weird that they all changed their name to Ruby at the same time. Like they got together and made a family decision. Almost like they were trying to dissociate themselves from something. And I'm not talking about their being Jewish. It's obvious that they're Jewish, but what could they have been trying to distance themselves from that name would have been associated with prior to the 1950s, right? I sense there's much more to the Rubenstein family than we've been led to believe. All right, next one, 11/29/63. A tremendous volume of teletypes being received by Dallas under both captions. Info in these teletypes is being incorporated into FD302s or inserts at Dallas for insert into reports being prepared, since teletypes in themselves do not indicate that sending offices are going to forward or inserts or 302s to Dallas confirming info set out in these teletypes. Many of the teletypes do not set forth identities of agents conducting interviews or investigation, thus materially handicapping Dallas in above efforts. All offices will immediately review all teletypes forwarded Dallas in these cases and shall identify something of agents do not appear, promptly notify Dallas of same, referring to teletype by date and time sent as well as subject matter. All right, skipping the rest of that. More administrative nonsense that we don't have to go into. All right, 11/29/63. Jack Ruby, Lee Harvey Oswald et al. Rebutel 11/29/63. The following information requested forwarded Dallas by teletype. Night security clerk John M. Verespi received telephonic information re Igor Vaganov contained in PH Tel to director in Dallas 11/23 last 5:10 a.m. No 302 being submitted. S.A. Thomas F. Lewis obtained info re Igor Vaganov contained in PM Tel. There it is. PM is in evening. Evening Tel to director in Dallas 11/24 last 1:30 a.m. No 30 being submitted. Info re Den Triegel's Bar, New Orleans, Louisiana, obtained by S.A. Stanley C. Zarnecki, contained in PH Tel to director and Dallas 11/27 last 5:30 p.m. Info from confidential informant being forwarded in inserts. So there's a reference here to Igor Vaganov. Let's see if it continues on that. And nope, it sure doesn't. Igor Vaganov being the ultimately who drove the red Ford Falcon who lent it to Kerry Thornley to make his getaway from behind the Texas Theater. All right. 11:30, reteletype call from William Hyde of Bureau to SAC Kansas City, November 30 incident. Polygraph operator S.A. James Glonek will take first availability of Braniff flight number 357 leaving Kansas City to arrive in Dallas, Texas. And, all right, that's interesting. Next one, 12/1/63, reference PM Tel November 30 last, 5:02 p.m. First name unknown Rubenstein, who sold punch boards between 1935 and 39 and who may be known by Sam Berger, following investigation conducted by S.A. J. Stanley Rotz in effort to identify and locate a Sam Berger in the Baltimore area who manufactured punch boards and is now stockbroker in New York City. No prior information received by Baltimore office could be identified with Berger. Current Baltimore City and suburban directories do not list a Sam or Samuel Berger with either of foregoing occupations. 1940, Two City Directory lists a Samuel Berger who manufactured punch boards at 317 North High Street and whose residence was Philadelphia, Pennsylvania Street, address not given, 301 through 317 North High Street, now occupied by Maryland Cup Company, and 108 South Charles Street, occupied by Henry D. Menzel Wholesale Paper Company. Both firms not open until Monday, December 2 next. Telephonic contact with families of all Samuel Bergers listed in Baltimore City and suburban telephone directories determined none of these is identical with the Sam Berger in question. Attention to Philadelphia is directed to Baltimore Airtel November 15th last. Daniel Webb feud, F-U-D-E, setting lead for interview of Samuel Berger, 180968 Avenue, Philadelphia. For information concerning Webb, a deserter who was born April 5, 1938 at Mariana, Cuba, who was reportedly employed by Berger as exercise boy for racehorses. Philadelphia contact foregoing Samuel Berger to determine if he is Berger in question, and if so, interview him and indicated in retell. If he is not correct Sam Berger, will check city directories and other logical sources to locate proper one. If located, will advise Baltimore to discontinue. All right, December 1st, from a two-director from SAC, Chicago. Reference Bucall, November 30, advising Bureau desires all news persons present at Dallas Police Department. November 24 last be interviewed. Paul Sisko was interviewed by Special Agents Joseph M. Culkin and Charles Setar, S-E-T-A-R, on 11/30/63 at Chicago office of the FBI. Sisko advised that he's employee of News Film Department of UPI. That's, I think, United Press International or something like that. He stated that in his capacity, he was present at the basement of the Dallas Police Department building in the morning of November 24, 1963. Sisko advised that he entered the basement area through the ramp entrance on Main Street at about 9 a.m. On his initial entry, he was required to exhibit his Chicago Police Department press card to a police officer on duty at the entrance. He stated that there was only one policeman on duty at this entrance. He had noted several officers on the Commerce Street side of the police department building. During the next few hours, Sisko departed the ramp via the Main Street entrance on 2 occasions. On both occasions, he told the officer on duty that he was going out to get equipment and would be back momentarily. He stated on these 2 occasions the policeman let him re-enter the ramp without again showing his press card. Sisko stated that he felt that this was due to the fact that the police officer recognized him as having identified himself in his initial entrance. Sisko could describe this officer only as about 6 foot 3 inches, husky, probably dark complected. Sisko stated that he did not notice any other police officers on the Main Street side at this time. Sisko stated that he had no knowledge of any unauthorized persons in the basement. Sisko stated that he had no knowledge or reason to believe that any person conspired with Ruby in the killing of Oswald. Sisko related that he had no knowledge that any police officer or other official conspired or permitted the unauthorized presence of anyone in the basement. Sisko said that he cannot positively say that he saw Ruby until after Oswald had been shot and Ruby was in custody of the Dallas Police Department in the basement area. Sisko said that during the press conference held at the police station about 1 a.m. Saturday morning, November 23, which Sisko attended, he remembers some unrecalled person pointed to an individual standing on a table and say, quote, "What's a nightclub owner doing here?" unquote. Sisko said he looked at the person standing on the table and recalls that only the person was wearing dark glasses. Sisko states he cannot definitely say it was Ruby, but feels in retrospect that it must have been him. Sisko said that before Oswald was brought from the elevator into the basement, about 6 police officers armed with rifles came out of the interior area of the building and went out onto the Main Street entrance, presumably, according to Sisko, to take up guard on Main Street. Sisko stated that he was one of 3-man UPI employees from Team Chicago present at Dallas PD on 11/24/1963. He identified the others as Oliver Oakes, Oakes, and Isidore, looks like Bleckman, Bleckman. If we could, let's pull everything on these 2 guys. Bleckman was with Cisco in basement until after the shooting. Oakes left about 10:30 a.m. to cover press conference being held by wife of Governor Connolly. Cisco states his UPI team got good film of the shooting and also possibly film of police department exterior as it appears a few hours prior to the shooting. He states some of this film may have been cut or edited as part of normal routine. This film sent to UPI News Film Department, 448 West 56th Street, New York, New York. Cisco stated that he retained a yellow cab to stand outside Main Street entrance of the police department building for expedited transportation of film. Believes cab number may have been 932. Driver described as probably in his 50s, gray hair, no hat. This cab stood by on Main Street from about 9:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. November 24. Cisco recalls meter for waiting period was about $8.50, and he gave driver $10. Dallas identify and interview cab driver mentioned by Cisco. Chicago had arranged interview of Isidore Bleckman evening of November 30th. Oliver Oakes unavailable until late morning of December 1 next. Arrangements have been made to interview Oakes. Then Chicago will advise further. That's some interesting stuff, right? So one thing I'd really love to do, and I don't know that anyone's ever actually done this, there's that one picture of the midnight press conference, and it's got a room full of fucking people. And I've seen random references to identifications of some of these people, but not all of them. I would love, love, love to have that picture like fully identified. God, I just know how much work it is to do that, and it's unfucking believable. All right, December 1st. One thing I want to point out, isn't December 1st a week later? And just imagine how much work has already been done between the 22nd and the 1st. Crazy, right? Isidore Bleckman, apartment 101, 6002 North Kenman, Chicago, was interviewed evening November 30th. S.A. George D. Gattens and William J. Smith Jr. at his residence. Bleckman said he has been employed as a photographer by UPI for a little over a month. Bleckman stated that he was sent to Dallas Friday, November 22, immediately after news of President Kennedy's death. On Sunday, November 24, he stated that he went to Dallas, Texas Police Department about 8 a.m. His reason he added for being at the police department was because of the department's announcement to the press that Lee Harvey Oswald would be moved from the police department to the county jail at 10 a.m. November 24. He said he entered the police department through the main entrance doors and took an elevator to the third floor of the building, where heretofore the press, photographer, etc. had previously been accommodated. As he emerged from the elevator, Bleckman said that he was asked by a uniformed armed policeman to identify himself, which he did by exhibiting his press credentials before he was permitted to enter the third floor. He said he remained a little while on the third floor before taking the elevator to the booking room in the basement, where he remained until 10 or 15 minutes prior to Oswald being brought out of the elevator by police. About 10 to 15 minutes prior to Oswald's appearance, he said he and other photographers and newsmen were all asked to vacate the booking room, which they did. Bleckman said he then took up position in the front of a window in the booking room so he could photograph Oswald as Oswald emerged from the elevator. As Oswald emerged, he said he got his photographs and then raced to the far side of the ramp so he could continue to photograph Oswald as he emerged from the booking room, presumably would lead there from the waiting armored car, which would be used to transport him to county jail. Bleckman stated that he was in this position as Oswald was let out of the booking room and that he had his camera going from that time on. An individual later identified as Jack Ruby cut through photographers, TV cameramen, etc., a short distance to Bleckman right and proceeded to shoot Oswald. Bleckman said he continued to take action photos throughout. This film, which Bleckman stated recorded all activity from the time Oswald emerged from the elevator into the booking room and from that room to where he was shot, is presently in the hands of his employer, UPI, in New York City or Washington, D.C. Bleckman stated that between 9 and 10 a.m. The same morning, he proceeded from the booking room to the ramp and left the police department premises and was permitted to do so only after identifying himself. His reason for leaving, he told the officer at the Main Street entrance of the ramp, that had to leave to get equipment. On his return, he was permitted to re-enter the police department premises by the same route without identifying himself, but that he presumed the armed officer on duty recognized him as having left the ramp shortly before. Bleckman said he saw no one in the police department on the ramp, who was not believed by him to be a member of the department or working press. He said he had no knowledge of anyone permitted to gain entry to the police department on Sunday, November 24, without properly identifying himself, and neither did he have any knowledge or indication that any police officer or official conspired or permitted the unauthorized presence of anyone in the basement. Bleckman said that to his knowledge, he had never seen Ruby prior to Ruby's actual shooting of Oswald, although on Friday evening, November 22, when Oswald was brought to the lineup room of the police department, according to various persons, identities unknown, Ruby was alleged to have been present and allegedly asked a question of Oswald. The exhibition of Oswald in the lineup room was apparently for the convenience of the press and photographers than for any police function, according to Bleckman. Bleckman stayed at Parkland Memorial Hospital later on, Sunday, November 24, an individual described as in his early 30s, 5 foot 8 inches tall, 180 to 200 pounds, sturdy build, blonde hair, who was either a director of a TV station or in charge of a TV crew from Dallas station, told him in the presence of Henry A. Kokojan, Kokojan, 9009 Freeport Drive, Dallas, Texas, telephone Davis 81043 that an upper window of a building on either Main or Commerce Streets overlooking the police department ramp was open Friday after the president's assassination, all day Saturday and Sunday, but that shortly after Oswald's murder, the window was shut. Bleckman stated that he could recall being told nothing additional by this individual, but that the above caused speculation among themselves as to whether Ruby had an accomplice or whether the others besides Ruby were interested in doing away with Oswald. Dallas interview Kokojan determined identity of source above information in interview. New York at UPI headquarters locate film shot by Bleckman and determine its availability. See, this is fucking dynamite. This shit right here is fucking fire. And I'm going to be totally upfront. I've spent very little time on Oswald's shooting, pretty much because it's obvious once you put two and two together that his best friend in the whole world in Dallas was George Butler, the head of the police union, who had free reign wherever the fuck he went. It was in regards to law enforcement. He's the one that led him into the fucking building, and that he was seen on an elevator 2 hours before he's supposed to have been in that building by someone else, which we'll probably get to along these documents. Right. Once you put those two things together, you realize he was let in by George Butler. He was been in that elevator. And once you put Samuel Ruby at play, you realize Samuel Ruby bought the money order and then passed it to a cop that had it slipped into Jack's property. That simple. Samuel Ruby was impersonating Jack all weekend while Jack went to take Andrew Jerome Blackman back to Galveston. That's how that all went down. And hopefully we will get a lot of that information. See, when I was starting to get a little bit bored of some of this stuff, right? Some of these random calls to the police, blah, blah, blah. But if they're going to be getting into this stuff, we're going to continue on with these Jack Ruby files until I'm no longer entertained by them. So, but this is some really good stuff here. I'm going to continue on a little bit longer, and then we're going to call it for today and pick up here tomorrow. I'll probably do another 10 pages or so. All right, nothing but requesting interviews. All right, here we have one that's redacted, 11/29/63 to the director from SAC New York, assassination President John F. Kennedy, 11/22/63. Dallas AFO, Jack Leon Ruby, with a little circle. There must be a missing name here, Jack Leon Ruby. That little circle. I'm going to screenshot this and send this over to Ryan. We had this conversation recently, because this is all over the Jack Valenti file. And we both kind of concluded that it was because it was a name missing. But I'm going to revisit that with him. All right, then this whole fucking paragraph. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5 lines. Fully redacted. 11/29/63. Same headings. Following is information requested forwarded Dallas by teletype. Night Security Clerk John Verespi. Oh, this is the Igor Vaganov one. See, there's going to be a lot of duplication. It's just like there is here. All right, 12/1/63. Essays. Charles V. Shipley and John M. Barry on 11/30 last interviewed Robert McEwen. This is a good one. Oh, wait a minute. This is funny. Because Robert McEwen is a big-time connection to Jack Ruby down in Galveston. But there's another Robert McEwen that is involved in the the booking business, right? I read this document like 5 fucking years ago. Yeah, so let me read this because I got a kick out of this. Just goes to show you how, like, God, just when you think that a name can't resurface again, it does in a reconstituted kind of manner. 12/1/63 essays Charles Shipley and John Barry on 11/30 last interview Robert McEwen at Club Gazelle, Newport, Kentucky. McEwen advised as follows. McEwen is an entertainer working as master of ceremonies, comedy, song, and dance man. His stage name is Bobby O'Day. His current address is Metropolis Hotel, Cincinnati, Ohio. May be contacted at any time through his booking agent, Mike Riaffi, 818 Olive Street in St. Louis. Or McEwen's cousin, James Mawatt, M-A-W-A-T-T, or A-M-A, I can't read that. It's got a line over it. 162 197 Mile Road, Detroit, Michigan, which address is considered by McEwen as his permanent address. During the period of 1 week before Christmas 1962 until 2 weeks in January 1963, McEwen appeared as an entertainer at the Carousel Club in Dallas. He then became acquainted with Jack Ruby, who managed the club and saw Ruby daily during that period, but did not become particularly friendly with Ruby. This constitutes his entire contact with and knowledge of Ruby. He recalled Ruby lived in a single room behind the club, in a room in which he kept 2 dogs. The room having been very an untidy appearance. McEwen's act went well at the Carousel Club for about 1.5 weeks at this time. McEwen told 2 or 3 jokes, which he characterized as inoffensive, but relative to Jewish people. Ruby confronted McEwen immediately upon termination of McEwen's act. Ruby was excited and took offense at the jokes, saying that my people have suffered enough. McEwen had been telling jokes referring to other nationalities and racial groups to which Ruby had taken no exception. McEwen said Ruby was easily excited and seemed to him to be erratic and nervous. He could cite no specific instances other than the above to substantiate his characterization. On New Year's Eve, 1962 to 63, McEwen recalls that he was at a New Year's Eve party at a motel named Not Recallable, where he and other entertainers were staying in Dallas. Ruby was also there. He recalls Ruby throwing firecrackers and cherry bombs in the swimming pool, but this activity was not out of keeping with the general activities of those at the party. McEwen never heard of Lee Harvey Oswald prior to the assassination. He knows of no association between Ruby and Oswald, knows of no connection of Ruby with any organizations. McEwen recalled that one Pepper Payne, currently appearing at the Gaiety Theater in Cincinnati, Ohio, was also at the Carousel Club in Dallas at the time that McEwen was there. Cincinnati interview Pepper Payne, re-association and background of Ruby. All right, I'll read this one, and this one will wrap it up for today. 12/1/63. Read Dallas Tell, November 29 last, 4:33 p.m. Read Mrs. Ruth E. Bonds, a.k.a. Mrs. Joseph Bonds, Dale Belmont. Mrs. Ruth E. Bonds, 1173 6 College View Drive, Silver Springs, Maryland, when interviewed by S.A. Leland Hudson and Charles M. Fleury, November 30 last, advised she and her husband owned and operated the Skyview Club, a.k.a. Sky Club, on Commerce Street, just outside of Dallas, Texas, from 1948 to 53 or 54. She knew Ruby only as another club owner and had never been associated with him or other than limited contact on occasion when she and her husband visited Ruby's club. She'd never worked as a stripper, never worked for Ruby, and had never had any heard of Lee Harvey Oswald prior to the assassination or of the president. She knew of no personal associates of Ruby, but named Pappy Dawson, owner of Pappy's Showland, and Abe Weinstein, owner of the Colony Club. Guys, let's pull everything on Abe Weinstein and the Colony Club. I think we already actually did, so if you could just re-link that, it'd be great. Both of Dallas as other club owners who would have known Ruby, at least through business. She described Ruby as being poorly educated and a quiet person. He had a reputation as a good fighter. He reportedly acted as his own bouncer at his club. Interview of Bonds sex perversion, political beliefs, subversive activities on part of Ruby negative. She regarded Ruby as having normal mentality. She said she left Dallas in 1955 and had no contact with Ruby since. See, here we go. He's reported as a good fighter, right? I mean, so once again, the overwhelming conflicting descriptions that we get of Ruby are extremely important. They'll eventually go to show that we're dealing with 2 different people here, and that 2 different people were acting as Ruby over the years. So, All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, or we will knock out another episode of Ruby, and I will consider whether I want to do anything else next week. So if you want to hear something else next week, shoot me an email, and maybe you'll get your wish. So thanks, guys. Talk to you later.